30,000 cubic kilometers just in that Nubian sandstone aquifer alone that hadn't been fully mapped yet. Areas through Egypt, and you don't even get down into the largest of the Nubian sandstone aquifer. Those are small ones compared to what's in Central Africa under Chad. And those are African megalakes that used to be there. Drainage bases of African megalakes, way bigger than our Great Lakes. So imagine kind of the porosity in sandstone absorbing all that water. What's there?
But it's always something that nobody really expects. Like people can throw out, theories and ideas of how they might, implement some of this stuff into this new world, but it never goes down the way that people think that it's going to go down. Welcome back to Raised by Giants live discussion. Good to see everyone. It's been a minute. And we have an amazing show here for you guys here today with David DuByne from Adapt 2030 channel. How's it going, David? It's good to see you, my friend. Was that contract that they were going to sign with FEMA, that was for relief funds, right? And it was like $750. Is that true?
Yes. Absolutely. I because I don't like to say something unless I can double check it or prove it, but somebody actually had the contract and it had made rounds everywhere. And I even talked to a couple people on the Ham network that I listen to, and I'm in contact with actually two of them that are running supplies up. And that is absolutely a stated fact. Once you read that very fine print on the bottom. So what they have to do, there's a standard procedure. First, they have to get your approval to survey the property. That's page 1. And when you sign that, that's where it says it's a loan, not a, relief effort just given by the government, federal, as like, take the money, hope you can do something with it. Page 2, after you go in and they do the survey and they say, sign this, there's nothing on there that says anything you have to pay it back. That's how they catch people. So page 1, when you give them the permission to look on your land, that's where the fine print is. Please be aware and share that with anybody you know. If they take the money, they have to pay it back. Don't tell them not to take the money. They could definitely use the money and use the help, but they have to pay it back. It's not a gift. If they don't pay it back, they relinquish their land. Much like student loans, if you don't pay those back, they can lien everything you own. But this whole specifics on it is, we take your property if you don't pay it back. Not that we can lien your wages for X amount of years if you don't pay it back. They're taking the land out of the people in North Carolina if they don't pay it back. Again, land grab. Yes, no, I don't know how you would phrase that. I mean, it's deceiving because they don't tell you when you sign it. That's another thing. They won't point to that and go, by the way, here's the magnifying glass, and put on reading glasses and look through the magnifying glass and read that one font point at the bottom. They won't do that.
For $750, that is a raw deal, bro. Like, at least make it 10 grand if you're going to take my land if I don't pay it back. Come on, FEMA, do better. Do better. You're going to take my land over $750, which I can't verify. I don't know if that's 100% true or not, but let's just say that it is true. That is wild. $750. If I don't pay it back to $750, they're going to come and take my land. That's probably worth, I don't know what land is really worth there, but not more than $750.
Super. No, everybody wanted to move the countryside, so the prices here went like a 5x on everything. If you were in the countryside and you were on some usable land, it was like a 5x for everybody. or the 3x at the minimum. Like if you didn't get a double on your money, you got cheated. Like it was at least a 3 to 5x on every piece of property out in the hills that people wanted to flee to farm. If you had pasture land, it went from like 2 to 10, 12 actually. Someplace 13. I've seen some estimations of 17,000 from 2,000 to 4,000 to 17,000. You know, that's like a 4x. But everything everywhere is like a 3 to 5. It's expensive, and property taxes are expensive. But North Carolina was like this lush jewel that everybody wanted to get to. And it is very expensive comparatively to a lot of places in NC there.
I read somewhere that during the hurricane that hit North Carolina, it also took out 3 dams. Is that correct in saying 3? Some people have said 1, some people said 2, some people have said 3. What number of dams got taken out from this hurricane as well, which probably was the result of a lot of the flooding that happened, not only with the rain, but on top of that, with the dams breaking, that's going to increase the flooding as well.
They overtopped and they broke on the sides, just like we saw at Oroville, like ripped off the side. None of them collapsed into total catastrophic failure. They all overtopped. Duke Energy released all of the floodgates as high as they could go, and then they overtopped, and they were a waterfall. And I'm not talking like 6 inches of water going over, like 5 feet of water pouring over uncontrolled. And obviously that's going to rip out the sides. So massive erosion damage off the sides of those. So if there's another storm that goes up there within the next 6 or 8 months, they're going to have another exact phenomenon like this happen, because there's just no way to, there was so much erosion out of the dam. The dam's down 15 feet or something off the side where the erosion came through uncontrolled. So the dam wall's still there at a certain height, but where it was eroded is off that side. That's land 10 feet lower in many a place. Nothing catastrophically failed. All the dams held, but they were overtopped and massive erosion on the sides of the dams. And again, in addition to having the full floodgates open and then the overtopping and then the overspilling where just water finds its way. And I will say the evacuation orders were far too late. By the time those people got the evacuation orders, a 30-foot wall of water was already coming down the river, and it was just far too late. Even, you know, the stories of it are like, people are in their house watching the water come up to their front porch, and they're like, we just got to get out of here ourselves. And then, like, you know, they could hear something finally coming over their radio as they were actually crawling out of their houses to get up the back of the mountain as they're watching their house float away in front of them. Finally, they could hear something coming through on the radio, like, go to higher ground, go to higher ground. Well, yeah, that system also needs to be revamped. The early warning system, just like, you know, when we had the Boxing Day tsunami or the day after Christmas across anywhere where that big earthquake occurred in Thailand, and that huge tsunami all across the Indian Ocean, like they really bumped up their early warning systems for tsunamis. Well, there has to be another bump up the early warning system for this type of mountain floods, because whatever they had just was way too late and not deliverable, because so much infrastructure is already wiped out. Like there was no communication devices functioning at that time. By the time the word came, most people didn't even get it because there was no way for them to receive messages. Like the cell phone towers were already gone. And it was an archaic system built for something when it didn't really flood. Like very few people had flood insurance because, like in a mountain area, generally the water just kind of runs off. You don't have quote unquote floods like you do down the basin of the Mississippi, where you might get a bunch of feet underwater, where your house might get submerged to the first floor. That just never happens in the mountains until this time. So most people didn't even have flood insurance, and that's a different animal than having homeowners insurance or fire insurance or this kind of earthquake damage insurance. Most people didn't have flood insurance because they never had to have it, because nobody ever thought there would be a flood at this magnitude. That, like, the understanding of a flood in a mountain is your river gets big and it just goes down and you're high enough off it and just things flow down river. Like there's no floods. Okay, you might get a flash flood for a minute, but generally it flows into the mountain gorge and then down, and it never really touches the houses. And if it is, it's like, you know, just such a smidgen that it's just, only the idiots would build near that close to a river or a gorge that you would get that type of water height. And I don't even think insurance company would insure you unless you're at the 500-foot level anyway. Or excuse me, 500 year flood levels. I know in Hawaii, my friend bought a house and they were near a creek going down. And he's like, I think it was 1,000-year flood level they had to build above. But anyway, there's definitely things you have to abide by getting insurance on the homes, 500-year or 1,000-year flood levels and above. So barely, I don't think almost probably 1 or 2% maybe at maximum had flood insurance because it's just not a thing in the mountains. Water goes down the hill. It doesn't flood your house. It goes down the hill. You might got a mudslide or something that knocked out part of a thing, but that would count as like a homeowner's insurance on a mudslide or something. But actual flood damage where your house is wiped away by a river, that counts as a flood. And barely anybody had those insurance on that, which is sad. They won't even be able to rebuild their homes with the money given. I think, I saw some estimates where they're saying, okay, if you had homeowner's insurance and you didn't have the flood insurance with it, they might give you like maybe 10% of the value of the home. So you can't even rebuild there then. Yeah, you got the land, which is worth a lot, but homes that were $100,000 went to $500,000. So, I mean, you can't rebuild at today's prices. You just can't. You can't.
Yeah, speaking of response and recovery, a lot of people are pointing to this project Phoenix 2.0. Have you seen this?
I think I've heard of it. Yeah, there it is. That same one. That was for Tampa Bay. Yeah, it is Tampa Bay, right?
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of people post about it, and it's basically a simulation for a hurricane hitting Tampa and the response that would be issued. And the problem is that this project Phoenix thing was developed in 2009. Right, this was developed in 2009 by Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, right? It's 15 years old, and it's a 4-tier training program for local emergency responders and small business owners in Tampa Bay, and it deals with the immediate response and then short and long term cleanup operations. It is a simulation of a Cat 5 hurricane type of worst case scenario hitting Tampa Bay. But Florida is a state that has been dealing with hurricanes for centuries now, and many people were relating this to Hurricane Milton, but it's no way, shape, or form related at all. It's 15 years old. It's not a drill to simulate a hurricane called Milton, and it certainly isn't a drill to simulate a Cat 5 hurricane, because that's what Milton turned out to be. It started at a Cat 5, and then when it made landfall, it turned into a Cat 3. And the worst that people got in Florida and southern Florida was some flooding and some damage, So some weather modification that was, right? And it's hurricane season. Hurricane season starts in June 1st of every single year, and it ends November 30th of every year. Now, if this had happened, let's say a hurricane just randomly hit North Carolina or hit Florida, let's say in March. Okay, then you could say, yeah, that's pretty weird that it happened then, but it didn't. They both hit pretty much in the dead center of hurricane season. So, people are relating this whole Project Phoenix thing as being some kind of proof that these hurricanes were some kind of weather modification, geoengineering stuff, when that's not the case. And again, I'm not saying, like I said in the beginning of this, that doesn't mean that they don't have the technology to do it. But though some of the patents and a lot of the things that people are sharing online are fake patents or non-working patents, I do think that they have the technology to possibly create something, or at least maneuver it or do something along those lines, right? But this Project Phoenix thing is not any proof that it was some kind of modified event. It's so interesting, Dave, because when something happens all of a sudden, everyone on the internet appears to be experts on that topic, right? They magically know everything about it before anybody else knows anything about it, you know? And for example, at the end of last year, everyone was expert forensic anthropologist with the Nazca mummies. Everyone knew everything about the Nazca mummies. And then they were experts in wildfire science. There were wildfire science experts with the Lahaina fires in Hawaii. And then everybody on the internet was all of a sudden ballistic experts with the attempted Trump assassination, which magically everyone is just quit talking about and don't talk about it and act like it didn't even happen anymore, which is really strange. And now apparently everyone has a degree in meteorology, right? And atmospheric scientists and geoengineering. You don't think that's strange, Dave? Where did everyone all of a sudden obtain all of these outstanding degrees in all of these areas of study?
It's unusual. Some of these patents are viable in a laboratory, but when you're trying to scale it to a hurricane that's absorbing heat from the sun at something like 1.7 quadrillion watts per second input into that system, for us as humans on this planet, I mean, even CERN uses far less power than that. So the idea that using electromagnetic frequencies to steer something, for me, I just don't think the power input's there, because NextRad towers are, 0.75 megawatt, not even a full megawatt for each NextRad tower. So even if you're fired every single one up, you're only talking several hundred megawatts, and you're talking quadrillions of watts. And then bringing that down in, you're talking, hundreds of millions of megawatts if you want to divide by a million to get that conversion. And you look at the power scales and it just could be, maybe not. But I do say that well-known science that has very big effect, that costs very little and can be dispersed over a wide area, is carbon black seeding or graphene particle seeding, electrostatic or superconductive graphene seeding on top of the hurricane. Like if they had multiple planes going over there, dispersing on a certain rate, but you're talking somewhere 60,000 foot in the atmosphere, above 70,000 foot to get that drift down on top of that storm system. These planes won't even be on radar. Unless, most of them would be ghost planes, but you'd have to have fleets of those. And the amount of carbon black coming out too. Now, putting it on top of a storm system so the heating can create an upwelling on a certain quadrant of that storm, that's well-known science. You can do that. But another thing that nobody talks about that has to be required is a high pressure blocking system to kind of lock that thing in and push it a certain direction. But again, to create a high pressure system that stays there for days or weeks on end in a certain area, oh my gosh. If you were going to do graphene seeding up there somewhere, carbon black dispersal, I would be raining black particles out of the sky, because that's about how long you would need to put it up there, as the dropout rate would start to match the dispersion rate after like 2 weeks, where you've seen all this black fine dust coming out covering everything. But there were no reports of that. So to be able to say that they've artificially created that high pressure system that locked that hurricane in place to make it track up this way, I mean, you would be seeing an enormous amount of black dust everywhere, all up and down the entire southeast US. None of that was reported. And even now, it should be coming down in rainfall, where we should be seeing like black soot rain everywhere. But it's just not being reported either. And even that long after the event, and the dispersion rate and gravity pulling something down out of the atmosphere, nobody's seeing that. So, for me, I'm like, to create a high pressure system, HARP's not going to work. It's like a little tiny beam in the ionosphere, and it goes way up and it bends, and that's not going to work. Cloud seeding in terms of geoengineering and air, like nanoparticulate dispersal, that's to reflect sunlight. You need to heat an area to get it to create a high pressure system. And there's just no, coming out of a lab is one thing, but to put a high pressure system that covers half the United States, You know how much graphene that would require in the atmosphere, or carbon black? It's unthinkable the amount. There would be thousands of planes spraying at 70,000 feet or 60,000 feet. I mean, somebody would notice that, and you would see the dropout of the particles too. But the sun would actually turn dimmer where they were doing that, and nobody reported. It's been crystal clear skies forever over an enormous amount of these places. If you're telling me you're going to see that much carbon black to create a high pressure and the sun didn't dim at all, that's really hard for me to believe, because visually, optically, you would see something, because they would need to put that much particulate up there to heat it, to get it to upwell, to create the high pressure system. Like if you just do, like you could do it in a lab. Yeah, I absolutely could. That's where a lot of these patents are made for. They're laboratory experiments that could be replicated in a laboratory, but on larger scales. In terms of continental scale, I just don't think we're there yet. You know, it's wishful, and I really believe a lot of this might be psyopish, where they want you to believe they have this much control, but they're far from it, unless there's technologies out there that are unknown to us, that are 50, 500 years advanced from where we sit now. But then you're starting to talk about, you know, Sumerian technologies that were brought through the collapses for the last, what, 7,000 years, that were those technologies to set up that advanced society at that time. Like, you know, you really got to stretch to try to bring it into something that makes sense of this manipulation. I understand you can like seed part of it to make it collapse on itself and intensify. You could steer it to an extent, but to put a high blocking pressure system in place to make it run up a certain line, that's outside my concept to think that's possible right now. But perhaps I'm wrong. I'm always willing to learn and absorb new information. No pun intended with the heat absorption on the carbon black.
Yeah, again, guys, I'm not saying that patents don't exist. So some do, but just because a patent exists, which a lot of this came from Alex Jones. Alex Jones was on this. A lot of the conspiracy community just listens to Alex Jones in the morning and then goes out and parrots everything that he says later on that day, like verbatim, the same thing, and acts like it's their information. I'm not saying that patents don't exist, but just because they exist doesn't mean that they're actively being used, and that doesn't mean that this hurricane was some kind of weather modification thing. If you applied that logic to the CIA has a patent for a heart attack gun, over 1,000 people die of heart attacks every single day. Is that all those people dying from the CIA heart attack patent gun? I don't think so. You know, so you can't apply a logic because that there's patents for something that means that's proof and evidence that something that this hurricane is a manufactured hurricane. That's garbage, in my opinion. It's getting to this point where this community, Dave, is just going to implode upon itself, and we're getting to that point right now, and I see it. I see it coming, and I'm trying to tell people, don't be saying things before you have all the evidence for. Don't be saying things that you don't know anything about, because it's just adding to this echo chamber of garbage and nonsense, you know?
And we pointed out two events that were echoey nonsense too. You know, since our shows, we've done shows together. We pointed out two of those that never manifested. Remember that?
I said a tsunami was going to hit California, and it didn't, but I still think something might be coming for California. California hasn't had anything wild and crazy happen to it for a really long time. Not a lot of damage. There hasn't been a lot of earthquakes that's created a lot of problems in California. So I think something is going to come for California. But yeah, I definitely, what did I say, within like a year or 2 years or something like that. But yeah, I was completely wrong, and I own that. 100% I was wrong on that. And but another thing that we talked about before the last time that you were on my show, that people are also applying to weather modification and HARP, is these auroras that are happening, that people are seeing further south than normal. But if you remember, Dave, the last time you were on 6 months ago, we talked about that exact same thing. The same thing was happening. People were seeing the aurora further south than they normally do. It's the exact same thing, and they did that same thing again in 2023. It's because of solar storms. The solar storms is pushing the aurora the northern lights further down south. And because HARP is like a very popular thing to talk about now it's just HARP. It's HARP. HARP is creating the simulation in the sky to show people in the south this aurora, the northern lights. They're magically seeing it because HARP is generating the northern lights. It's wild. When the exact same thing was happening 6 months ago, go back to the previous show, the very last show that me and David were on. We were talking about this. We talked about how people were seeing the northern lights pretty far south. And then if you type into Google, other times that the northern lights has been seen further south, you'll see that it happened in 2023 as well.
Happens all the time. And to wind up here, a declining Earth's magnetic field and higher solar activity, those two things are going to push aurora further south. If we don't have the shield in front of the planet to stop those particles from running in and down the magnetic field lines, then what do you expect to happen? Of course, this is going to be a phenomenon too that's going to get far more intense. Far more intense. So if you think you're seeing some crazy stuff now, this is just the beginning of it. This is the beginning of the amplification phase of this cycle that we're going to work through. And again, I will say it clearly that all of the powers that be, quote unquote, understand this cycle has returned. Now, can every place on the planet be salvaged? Obviously not. They understand where the non-salvageable zones are, and they also understand where the areas that shall increase in bounty will be, like Sahara, desert now greening, the North African Sahel, but a lot of areas 45 north and above to the pole, and then 45 south to the South Pole. Crop production is going to go to nearly zero in these areas, so you're going to have to set up a new crop growing area. And why would you not build it where the above ground water rainfall is increasing from the West African monsoon all the way across Africa in the north? And then you could tap all those aquifers from beneath like Gaddafi did, and then Nubian sandstone aquifers, Sus aquifers. It's like million square kilometers of water under there in the aquifers that hasn't been tapped yet. And that's probably very low estimate in terms of, because you got to think there were like 30,000 cubic kilometers just in that Nubian sandstone aquifer alone that hadn't been fully mapped yet. And then the Sus aquifer, you're looking at another 30,000 square kilometers. You're already, and then areas through Egypt, and you don't even get down into the largest of the Nubian sandstone aquifer and Sus. Those are small ones compared to what's in Central Africa under Chad. And those are African megalakes that used to be there. Drainage bases of African megalakes, way bigger than our Great Lakes. So imagine kind of the porosity in sandstone absorbing all that water. What's there? So what we see, this Earth's magnetic field decline. Okay, solar aurora, they're going to be far more larger solar storms from this point. You're going to see way more aurora. You're going to watch our crops go offline more and more, and your food prices are going to rise. You're going to watch a huge amount of investment pour into Africa to set up a new food growing area. That's kind of the world we're going to move into. But now the control mechanism will be there too every step of the way. So get used to that, and you can kind of pre-plan. You can sort of look around the curve or a little bit on this. But I'm sure not moving to Africa right now to try to like be in the middle of the zone. It's not that ready yet, but it is going that direction.
They're going to send money to set up agriculture in Africa because it's going to become a green zone. It's going to be lush.
Oh, it already is becoming lush. Yeah, the 4,000-year return on that is starting as we speak. And if you look back at maps as early as, like, say, 1300 or even into the late 1400s, they show a lot of what would be forest areas along in what is now desert. So these flips from desert to forest, forest to desert occur far faster than anybody thinks. It doesn't take 6,000 years for it to come back to forest. It'll take a couple hundred max. And if you can already know where the precipitation's falling, there's a huge amount. This one, there was this, okay, so everybody looked at, if you go to sot.net and you scroll down into their Earth Changes section, Morocco had a huge, massive amount of rain come down. And just in one night, the water had pooled in and created a 7-mile long by 3-mile wide lake in one evening. But this was the base of an African megalake. This was the base of one of the smaller megalakes at the same drainage basin where, well, again, people had villages and towns. And if you're wondering why they're flooding, because they followed the drying out lake beds in and in and in to its lowest point. And now the cycle is flipped, and now the rains are coming again. So it's going to expand out and out and out. So all these cities and villages and towns that are all along these lake beds are just going to get flooded from this point. I mean, if I was there, I'd be like, we're moving way hella up, way away from here, because it's going to keep refilling from this point for the next how many centuries? We're at the end of the cycle. See, that's the whole point. We flipped over, and everybody understands this. We flipped on the cycle. Hydrological cycles changing across the planet. Some places are going to become really dry. Like the African Sahel area is becoming incredibly wet, but the Amazon's becoming incredibly dry. And if you go back, there's a bunch of peer-reviewed studies that show there is a relationship between the greening of the desert and the drying of the Amazon. Back and forth on 6,000-year cycles. So I'm going, this is starting to play out again. So at least we have some correlation of that actually manifesting right this second. Do the math. Our present economy can't stay together because it was all built on the prior world. So we're just going to flip into a new world based on cryptocurrencies, more control, track and trace, digital IDs, all this stuff moving forward. And it literally is the new world. And I'm just trying to figure out how to navigate through it. So I appreciate you having me on, but any last thoughts on that? I would love to hear it.
I think that is, I think that the thing is how they're going to do the things that you said. That's the real question, is how. Like, yeah, we can talk about that these things are coming, but it's always something that nobody really expects. Like, people can throw out theories and ideas of how they might implement some of this stuff into this new world, but it never goes down the way that people think that it's going to go down. It's always, there's a curveball that's always thrown in there. And Dave, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate you a lot. Let the audience know where they can find you, and tell them about your new website that you got up as well.
Oh, the Civilization Cycle podcast we're firing while we're going civilizationcycle.com. Check it out there. Put your email in. We'll get you the show notes on every single week that we talk live Thursday nights, 10 p.m. to midnight on Revolution Radio, streaming through Rumble is our main point out on that, and the Adapt 2030 channel. So we continue to, along with Ransom, try to bring you the information on a weekly, as well as the video updates I try to do pretty much every day, every other day. But it's all about getting the information out so we can come to solutions together and understand, like you said, it's a curve. Things are always constantly in motion. It's never going to be straight from point A to point B. So by putting the information out, at least we can try to come to some solutions together here on, it might not be 100% the way it goes, but what if it's 80% correct and the other 20% needs to be navigated day by day? At least you kind of get the general trend of where it's going, not the exact play-by-play, but the trend.
Absolutely. I agree. I'll get that website in the description of this video. Thanks so much for coming on, Dave. Really appreciate it. It's always wonderful talking with you. Thanks everyone in the chat. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel and the algorithm. Share, subscribe.
Pro Clear Cleanse is the most powerful spray cleaner on the market today. No elbow grease necessary. Pro Clear Cleanse cuts through grease and grime like a chef's knife. Finally, the one cleaner that can do it all. Powerful surfactant cleaning technology cleans ovens, glass, porcelain, even polished wood. Environmentally friendly, less packaging and waste with no harsh smells, pet safe, child safe. 5 tablets equals 1 bottle of traditional cleaner. It's 5 months of cleaning for a fraction of the cost. Behold the grease-erasing power of Odor Crush. Simply drop a tablet into your bottle of warm water and shake it so it is evenly diluted. Spray the surface you want cleaned. Let set longer for tougher grease. Take a paper towel or a reusable cloth and wipe. Done and done. One of the best things about Pro Clear Cleanse, it's you can take it anywhere. Hiking, camping, or on vacation. Without having to buy or bring cleaner, you can store the same potential in the tablets, then just add water and bam, you have a bottle of cleaner. Order now and make life a little easier and cleaner.